Welcome, Dr. Funk.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share updates and the great news about the College of Veterinary Medicine. I'm getting ready to share my screen here. All right. It's going a little slow here, so let's see. There we go. All right. So first and foremost, before I start with my presentation, I need to let you know about an important aspect is that we have one of Yale's own in our inaugural class. She reached out to me when she got the announcement. I don't know that she's had a chance to meet you, but she reached out when she got the announcement, when disappointed that she couldn't attend. But we do have a very direct connection right now. So one of your alumni have joined us. So one of the things I'd like to point out that might be of interest to you is actually Anne's degree, which is in East Asian Studies. And actually, I couldn't be more pleased than to have someone with a degree and a background outside of the sciences in our profession. And certainly, in order to enter the college, we need students to have those basic science prerequisites. But one of the things we're fully recognizing is that in order to advance our profession, we really do want students who come from a lot of different backgrounds, both from their personal lives and their academic careers. And so it's wonderful to have Anne in our class. And I know she's looking forward to the opportunity to meeting the rest of you when she can. She happens to be in class right now, so she can't attend our presentation today. To give you a little idea of what's happening in veterinary medicine with you, I'd like to share a few stories that I think are emblematic and in particular, something that Jack just brought up while we were chatting before the presentation started. So I'll go through this in a little bit of storytelling, and then maybe we can talk about how we're trying to advance and meet these needs in the College of Veterinary Medicine. So I'd like to introduce you to Eric and Matthias and their beloved dogs, Buddy and Sally. This morning, they were awakened by their Amazon Alexa device, indicating that their beloved dog, Sally, was acting differently. Sally has a wearable, and they noticed changes in her motions during the night and actually detected fever as well. So they awoke Eric and Matthias. In addition to awaking Eric and Matthias, they sent a notice to their veterinarian, who received the information about what Alexa and the wearable had detected, and also brought up Sally's history and went ahead and made an appointment for that morning for them to bring Sally in. At the clinic, they have a total integrated data set that relies on artificial intelligence to integrate the wearable data, nutritional intake, and her medical history. They also have Sally's full genetic code that is integrated into that database to be associated with potential disease risk factors. And a lot of that is evaluated by the veterinary nurse, who also has a degree in data analytics. All of this is prepared to be given to their veterinarians so they can address Sally's needs. Here's another potential story. In southern Arizona, a drone that does surveillance on cattle movements on range has detected a group of cattle that is moving less than it normally would. Normally, they would move through a certain area of range, and what they're noticing is that the animals aren't moving in the expected pattern. They can detect this through RFID emissions from the cattle's tags. This leads to an immediate notification to the state veterinarian and also to health professionals at the border, both in Sonora as well as the USDA APHIS office that sits at the border between Arizona and Mexico, to indicate that there's a potential for a foreign animal disease, because this decrease in movement is indicative of a potential risk for foot and mouth disease. This sets off an immediate investigation into the health of these cattle, and they can send out the groups Because they were able to detect this disease outbreak very quickly, they were able to put in controls that put in ring controls, is what we would normally do in an FMD outbreak in the US, ring controls that allow for keeping those animals from coming into contact with other animals, the ability to trace and track where they were coming from, and the ability to put buffers around them so no animals move within a range of potential transmission. Because this was in place, the United States beef and pork supplies were able to be sustained, keeping many family businesses and the entire US food export business able to continue because they were able to control a localized outbreak. I'd also like to introduce you to Clarence and Mary and their beloved dog, Steve. One of the things that Clarence and Mary have been struggling with themselves, as well as a common problem for Steve, is challenges with weight management and obesity and onset of diabetes. Clarence and Mary had had a long time of difficulty in getting lifestyle changes in place in order to help manage their diabetic disease. But interestingly, once they found out that Steve also was having the same challenges they were, and that Steve really required an increase in his exercise, they were much more willing to engage in exercise themselves. So the need for their animal to be healthy also increased their physical fitness and helped them manage their disease state as well. So the value of the human-animal bond from the standpoint of how people care about the health of the animals also has important health implications directly for their human owners. Another aspect of veterinary medicine that is really important is access to care. Clarence and Mary had had difficulty in accessing a veterinarian in their community, but recently local groups, either through the Humane Society or veterinary practices that are focused on accessibility, had come into their community. And it was a key reason why they were both able to access care for Steve, and which ultimately led to their own improvement in their own health. I bring up some of these stories, and in some ways, some of them are a bit futuristic, and in many ways, many of them are playing out even today in veterinary medicine. And I'll give you a really concrete example that many people aren't aware of. So the largest employer of veterinarians in the world right now is Mars Pet Care. And that is the company that's Mars, like the candy bars. And if you would talk to the Mars family about their businesses, what they would tell you, they are a very large animal health company with a small confectionery. So you may recognize some of these brands, and these are all owned by Mars. So they have several veterinary clinics. So consolidation and corporatization of veterinary medicine is becoming more common. So Banfield, Blue Pearl, VCA. We have several of these in our community here. They also own several animal food brands, right? So they have the nutrition that's going in there. Pet Partners, which you see on the lower left-hand side of the screen. That's a pet health insurance company. So they have that. They have a research arm. So in the upper right-hand corner, that's Waltham. They have their own research institute that's part of their organization. Wisdom Panel, maybe some of you have sent in your dog's DNA to find out what breed it is. Through use of Wisdom Panel, they have access to a lot of genetic information about dogs. And also they own Whistle, which is a wearable for dogs. So you can see here the ecosystem and the platform that Mars is building, and they're not alone. They happen to be out in front of many other organizations, but The scenarios that I talked about as far as Eric and Matthias, you can see that that is just a step or two away for companion animal health. Just to give you an idea of the scope and scale of this in veterinary medicine, if you look at the Mars Pet Care, they have about 2,000 clinics, 50,000 employees, and a little over 10,000 veterinarians, and are currently serving about 10 million animals. It's still a relatively small proportion of all veterinary practices, right? There's probably about 30,000 veterinary practices in the United States. Most of those are individual, small practice sizes, 1 and 2 person practices, but that's rapidly changing. And right now, the consolidation of veterinary practice is somewhere in the range. I would say we're getting closer right now to that 15% estimate of 5 to 15% of practices being corporate owned. And right now it's about 15 to 20 companies that are engaged in this corporate consolidation of veterinary practice. Another really important aspect of veterinary medicine, and we saw it escalate even more so during the COVID-19 pandemic, is increasing ownership of pets. And also, as we start to think about the value that pets bring to people's lives, both from emotional well-being and also physical well-being evidence, there's increasing importance placed on accessibility to care and the accessibility to have animals. And so one of the things that is a real challenge of veterinary medicine is accessibility to care. It's estimated that there's nearly 30 million dogs and cats that are in households that receive SNAP benefits as a measure of people who are financially struggling. And as we learn more about the human-animal bond and the benefits to humans for having animals, there's significant research in evaluating the benefit of animals in childhood development, the benefit of animals in aging, and there's just less research that happens in between those two demographic populations, but there's going to be, there's increasing awareness, I guess I would like to say, about the importance of accessibility to care across all basically abilities to pay. And although I've mentioned animal health insurance, it's still, third-party pairs are still a very small component in the veterinary healthcare world. And this is just another way to try to look at it. It isn't that they even have few pets. They have a lot of pets in households that are at the poverty level. And so the ability to make sure there's access to care in those settings is really important, and one of the areas in which veterinary medicine needs to and is trying to address in many ways. And most of the people in those communities do share that they have challenges to access care. Now, there are groups that are moving into that space to try to provide more accessible care. VetIQ and Pet Care had a goal of being in 1,000 Walmarts to provide low-cost wellness services for pets. And that's an area of rapid expansion. I want to just shift a little bit and move over into thinking about livestock. And, I talked a little bit about the move for using, for lack of a better term, big data or informatics in veterinary medicine. Quite frankly, in production animal medicine, there's been a lot of use of data monitoring for a long time. It's actually very common practice that dairy cattle have on wearable monitors that keep track of their movements, both for detection of potential illness. Also, it's very important for those of you who don't understand how milk is made, but cows have the same biology as other mammals, right? There needs to be a pregnancy in order for lactation to occur. And so successfully having cows conceive is really important for milk production. And so those monitors are also used to detect times when it's appropriate to have these animals to be bred, and so they can conceive and ultimately produce more milk. So integration of big data and production animal medicine is more rapidly advanced than it is in companion animal medicine, probably as a combination of the nature of these, individual producers have hundreds, if not thousands of animals that they keep data on. So the application of that analytics is a little easier than it is in individual 1 and 2 person practices who collect their data in ways that, are easily shareable among different practices. And that's where the corporate practices have a major advantage in accessing and using data and applying artificial intelligence and other predictive analytics approaches to understand more about animal health. We talked a little about shortages, and we also have significant shortages for food animal production medicine. And so as you'll see here, anything that's light blue in this thing is considered an area that has a shortage of veterinarians for to oversee food animal production. So it's really almost the entire nation that experiences shortages for food animal production. And that's also one of the areas we're really working hard at the University of Arizona to help get veterinary service in those communities and supporting veterinarians to be able to have successful business models in those communities. And just to let you know, for those of you who might care about where that is in Arizona, these are the particular areas in which there are food animal and rural area shortages. So a little bit about my background, I am actually, my background when I practiced veterinary medicine, I was a swine practitioner. So I worked for pork producers to help keep their animals healthy and make sure that they had good animal welfare so that they could be profitable businesses to produce meat. And I have to say, one of the things I think about as a former food animal practitioner is how long or what the nature of that type of practice might be with the emergence of cell culture-based meat products. So I think Tyson recently sold off its cell culture meat business, but they were working on it. But there are other companies that are emerging. I saw the other day, I think there are some chicken nuggets that are currently available, readily available that were made from cell culture. And, what will that mean as we move for that? And what's the role of a veterinarian in a situation where we get our animal protein products from cell culture development? So I've talked about some of the big picture items regarding veterinary medicine, and the next thing I'd like to just focus a little bit on are some really specific things about the veterinary profession challenges. And like in all circumstances, challenges bring great opportunities for change, and where I'm really excited to be at the University of Arizona's College of Veterinary Medicine, where we can have impact. So one of the major challenges for veterinary medicine is really, we're in a wellness crisis in our profession. Veterinarians have suicide rates higher than the general population, ranging from 2 to 3 times the general population. The highest suicide rates are actually 3 to 4-fold in young female veterinarians. And this is an incredible crisis and tragedy for our profession. Surveys have indicated that 1 in 6 veterinarians have considered suicide, and much of this is chalked up to issues associated with compassion fatigue, similar to our other health professionals. There's really just a call for us as a profession to address this, and it was mentioned in the introduction. We are taking an approach in the College of Veterinary Medicine for that, and I'll talk about that a little bit. The other aspect, like in all of higher education, there's a concern regarding the cost of a higher education. the mean educational debt for graduate veterinarians is $183,000. That's across the United States. And the mean starting salary for veterinarians is $80,000. So that's a little over a 2-to-1 debt to income ratio. If you look at newly graduated MDs, we don't look too different. The change is what the ultimate salary is. So our medical professional colleagues will certainly, as their careers advance, garner much higher salaries. If you look across all veterinarians, where the average salary is, it's somewhere between $100,000 to $120,000 a year. So certainly there's a real need for us to really look closely at the cost of a veterinary medical education. That's one of the things we're working hard at the University of Arizona, and trying to push it down towards what economists recommend. And we're not there, I will tell you that right now, for the University of Arizona, but as a debt to income ratio at graduation of about 1.4 to 1 is what's recommended. Another aspect of veterinary medicine is around day one readiness. Both students and stakeholders in surveys are reporting that they don't feel ready for practice. Veterinarians are, again, a bit different than our human medical colleagues in that we don't go into residency unless we're going to specialize afterwards. So after graduation and passing licensure exams, veterinarians are expected to be able to do all aspects of general practice. So surgery, everything, a stand-up health professional. And, along with everything else, this is a really important thing, not only from what I think we are accountable for in higher education to make sure our students are ready and feel ready. This is a really important link to the two previous things that we discussed, which is both wellness, right? Because if you don't feel ready, then your confidence isn't there, and new practice is more of a struggle. Our obligation from a standpoint of the cost of education, the students should certainly be ready to go when they leave. And so all of these three things tie in together as well. And then on the other hand, it's really a wonderful time to be a graduate veterinarian. Right now, there are currently about 3 jobs that may have dropped a little bit during COVID, but not by much. So I would say maybe we're at 2.5, but right before COVID, when I put this data together, there were 3 jobs basically for every graduate veterinarian, which is almost at a record high. Again, I mentioned we have many underserved populations. They just can't access veterinary care. There just isn't a veterinarian near them. There's increasing demands for specialists because willingness to pay for advanced medicine, particularly for companion animals, as people have changed the way they view companion animals in their life, and they've kind of moved from being something they own to the consideration of dogs and cats and other pet animals as family members. They're more willing to pay for advanced care. And another aspect of our profession that is a real challenge that we're working hard on is that the Atlantic magazine professed a few years ago that veterinary medicine is the whitest profession. At that time, it was 96% people that were white. This poses a major challenge for our profession. If we cannot, it actually is just really disappointing, because from my perspective, I want everybody to know what a wonderful profession this is and be excited about joining us. And that isn't occurring if we're 90% white right now. And so we're working really hard on making sure that a broad cross-section of society knows how fantastic it is to be a veterinarian and what the wonders are of coming to our field, so we can recruit more people into the veterinary profession. So what I'd like to do is share with you a little bit about how the University of Arizona's College of Veterinary Medicine is approaching addressing many of these needs. So the first thing is that we are leveraging evidence-based teaching and learning. So one of the ways that we're doing that is in our pedagogical approach, which we're using what's called team-based learning. and peer instruction. And those are, in essence, if you've heard of flipped classrooms, or maybe your children or you have been in a flipped classroom, it's a very particular type of that methodology that has years of evidence about the benefits for students, both from learning and retention of information, and also building important teamwork skill sets. A short explanation of how this works is that what students can do by themselves well, they do before class. So that includes reading or watching short videos, maybe doing some self-assessments. And then when they come to class, the first thing they do is they take a short test to check themselves, and also to inform the faculty to make sure that they understood what they needed to know to be able to be in class. And then they work through case-based class sessions, where they work together as teams to solve clinical cases, leveraging the learning objectives that they had for that session. It both increases retention of knowledge, and because they have to work as a team, improves a lot of the things that our stakeholders are saying our students need, which is our improved teamwork abilities, working through conflict, and communication skills. Another aspect of what we're doing, and was mentioned in the introduction, is a focus on wellness as a professional competency. So we think about wellness in the very broadest aspects of wellness. And so often that's usually highlighted pretty clearly by emotional and physical wellness, but we're also approaching it from a very broad standpoint, because wellness has many dimensions, right? And so there are a few models for it. You know, we talk about social, intellectual, and spiritual wellness that have to go along with emotional and physical and occupational. There are other models that think about it from this standpoint of, you know, work site wellness. Those are the policies and procedures and things that you have in your work life, how to do work-life balance, being in a workplace that's inclusive. Your personal and family wellness, right? Being able to integrate mind, body, and spirit, taking care of yourself and making sure that's a priority. And also things that happen in the community, right? Which is everything from policies to access to resources and just being able to meet your individual needs. We actually integrate this into our professional skills course. And so our students have to work through many of these things. Another aspect of how we're focusing on wellness, because sometimes you just need a physical manifestation of your commitment. We do have a really beautiful student wellness center where we do wellness programming from. It has meditation rooms, a parents room, places for students to be kind of in an outside environment for just having some time for peace, a place to do yoga or stretching, and a couple treadmills, just so they can step out and find some time to take care of themselves. Another aspect of what we're doing is the distributed clinical year. Let me do this. I'm doing cost conscious. Sorry, I had it out of order. So a couple things that we're doing to try to be cost conscious. We are focusing on a very limited number of prerequisites so that students who are interested in entering veterinary college could complete their prerequisites in 2 years. It also, and back to our example with Anne, allows more flexibility for students who are interested in doing a full baccalaureate or come from areas in which, maybe they got their baccalaureate that wasn't in one of the STEM-based fields. It keeps the prerequisites for them really doable so they can transition into our health professions courses. We also use a holistic admissions process. So certainly you have to have the academic performance, but we also have come to find out in veterinary medicine, as well as many other professions, that there are a lot of other things that indicate your ability for success and resilience within a really challenging academic program. We also have a 3-year curriculum. So we have the same number of semesters as other DVM programs. It's actually set by our accrediting body, but instead of taking summers off, we take more frequent small breaks. This allows students to enter the workforce 1 year sooner, have one less year of interest on their student loans. So it's one way in which we can help them with managing the financial burden of a veterinary degree. Just to give you an idea of where this lands and where the University of Arizona's prices fall. So this is basically the cost to go to any of these colleges of veterinary medicine if you're a non-resident, right? So this, just to give you that idea. So that ranges from a little over $200,000 at North Carolina State University to over $460,000 at our colleagues in Phoenix at Midwestern. And you'll see at the bottom, University of Arizona residents are going to be down at the level of North Carolina State University for their costs here. So certainly if you're a resident of Arizona, the presence of a public land grant College of Veterinary Medicine is going to be a financial advantage to you because formerly you had to leave the state and be a non-resident somewhere. Quality people to come to Arizona. We're very competitive in about the medium aspect of the cost. So we're able to recruit. Another unique aspect of our College of Veterinary Medicine is that we're not building a teaching hospital. There's two aspects to that. One of it is cost savings for us. Veterinary teaching hospitals are very expensive to both build and run. And also it is part of our philosophy about what's important regarding stakeholder and student feedback about their ability to be day one ready. We want our students learning in real world practice settings so they're able to do those things. I come from several programs. I'm proud of being part of those programs that have veterinary teaching hospitals. The challenges in those is that they've become tertiary care facilities. And so students just don't get to do the things that happen in the local general practice because that's not what comes through the door as cases. And so their ability to be in real world practice settings will help them be more ready as well. And we are also having required clerkships in rural areas and shelters so that the students get access or they get to see those areas that are in need of veterinarians and might be even interested in going there. Just a little bit about the timeline of our history. So as a reminder, we had our AVMA's Council on Education Accreditation site visit in May 2019. They met in September of 2019 to make a decision. They notified us in October that we could accept students. We started our first class in August of 2020, and that's a class of 2023 that your alum, Anne, is a member of. And this class will graduate in August of 2023. So we're very excited. And as far as accreditation, right now we're provisionally accredited. We are eligible for full accreditation after we graduate our first class. So we'll be able to announce that celebration hopefully shortly after Anne graduates. For many of you, I just want to share this. This is we do have a partnership with the Reed Park Zoo, so our students will be able to go out to the Reed Park Zoo. But this Wilbur and Wilma were getting a checkup by our veterinarian out there this last fall. So with that, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have or talk about anything of interest to you around veterinary medicine.
Julie, this is Jack, and this is a fantastic presentation. I'll add to that John Mars is our classmate of Yale 1957. So the relationship there is deeper and wider to Yale than you had realized. Beyond that, the sense of inadequacy that is present in your professional development people is throughout all of the medical professions as well, in that the new knowledge is just growing so rapidly. You could actually recognize here that we've got some superb work going on in human genetics and the aspect of personalized medicine and the issues of the vulnerability to various diseases on the human side. And in the veterinary side, we've got fascinating aspects in the equine side, because the horse races, we've got a real star here in the Arizona alumni. So you could give a few comments about how to look at pedigrees as far as horse racing is concerned, and the relationship to jobs of the future for individuals who will include the veterinary degree, but go beyond it in their future career.
Oh yeah. So Jack, I think you bring up a couple good things. So first of all, just I think the challenge is, and it's in most walks of life right now, right? The uh, volume and velocity and veracity of data and information and what we're learning is so fast, right? That it really isn't one person's job. And so that goes back to the idea of, for us as veterinarians, what is the role of veterinarians working alongside these new technologies and people who might work these new technologies for us, right? So I think that that's a really important piece that I just think about, right? Because no individual will be as part of all of that. Certainly there's a lot of emergence of utilizing genetics for understanding disease and disease prediction and comparative medicine as well, right? So I can't speak a lot specifically to equine genetics and racing, but we do have a faculty member she's doing a postdoc right now. She's a veterinarian, DVM PhD, doing a postdoc. She's an internal medicine specialist, but she in essence is looking at equine genetics to understand basically diabetes and other metabolic diseases in horses. And honestly, they can use that data to look at parallels in human genetic databases as well, right? So all of these things are really emerging quickly. The most, in animal health, the place where I know it's been used, and this goes back to our friends at Mars, they're actually the first group that I have seen start to use an algorithm using artificial intelligence for prediction of animal health. And that has to do with renal disease in cats. So as of right now, they have published an artificial intelligence based algorithm that can predict renal disease in cats 2 years before any diagnostic can, which actually allows the opportunity for interventions that will really extend the healthy lifespan of a cat. So that is the one place that I know is just actively going now, and there will be more rapidly emerging here as just access to data. The biggest challenges, in all honesty, is access to data and the willingness to share. Because in veterinary medicine, if you'll go back to the idea that we had all our practices, right, where a lot of data sits, are all 1 and 2 person practices, are all using different ways of storing data, holding data, and just barriers to access to it is, I think, really one of the main reasons that that there's some lag that will be, and really where Mars has some advantage, right, because they do have some more coordinated abilities.
One other area, Julie, if I may, and I'll stop after that so others will throw in questions, but I've been fascinated. I still retain a relationship to our armed forces, and the Texas A&M has been a tremendous resource of providing veterinary skills, both in terms of examination of meat supplies for all military services, but also there are specialized areas which, especially in terms of international, both humans and animals, certainly Afghanistan right now, as we're pulling out our shoot 'em up dead type of troops, and we've been working for over 10 years putting in public health and education type of people. So the aspect of how our institution can grow and impact global health through the skills of the veterinary sciences might be another area that you could address.
Yeah, Jack. Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I think many people don't understand the food safety and public health role that veterinarians play. So, after Mars, the next largest employer of veterinarians in the United States is the United States Department of Agriculture. It's the government, broad, and most of them are in the United States Department of Agriculture. Although many are with our military as well. And actually, interestingly enough, we actually have several students who have applied for the Army Scholarship for veterinarians, and so we're certainly collaborating and trying to help our students find their pathway into those careers. And then, certainly, I didn't talk about it very much, our research areas, but certainly One Health, which is really encompasses many of the aspects that you just talked about, Jack, which is thinking about animal, human, and environmental health is a main aspect. That's one of, actually, all of our students take a One Health course, so that they understand all of those intersections. And I think we also have some really tremendous opportunities here in Arizona, just because we are a border state, which gives just some ease to getting a lot of our students exposed to thinking more broadly and more critical thinking around how perspectives and aspects of animal health and public health differ in different regions. So I think I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. We're about halfway through hiring our faculty. So as we start to get more faculty richness, I'm sure we'll be able to have more engagement there.
I'll turn the floor over to others because I hope that others will throw meaningful questions. I can give more, but I'd rather hear other people put in their comments.
Okay.
I guess
Yeah.
from,
All right, go ahead, Belinda.
yeah, okay, this is Belinda. I spent a lot of my career living in the third world. And everything that you are describing in terms of the innovations, both in the way that you are teaching future veterinarians and in the utterly incredible potential IT advances in both small animal and large animal veterinary medicine are fascinating. But you touched briefly, I guess, on the issue in your last comment. How much of this, of these innovations are even applicable to the third world, or yeah, basically to the third world? And how do you see is there any path that you can see between the innovations that you are making in your school here and improving and advancing the practice of veterinary medicine outside of this particular area?
Yeah, so certainly this was a much more developed world centric.
I think you died.
Can you hear me, Belinda?
I can hear you.
Julie's mic.
Perspective.
Julie,
Can you hear me or no?
It's Jim, Julie. We lost you, I think, from the start of your response. If you could.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, my apologies.
No, not a problem.
Yeah, Belinda. So yes, and so I think there is plenty we can do, and I fully acknowledge. Actually, I just read a really great article this morning about challenge around the way we're thinking about public health and applying it in developing nations, and thinking through it. And so I do fundamentally agree, and that as we, I highlighted a lot of the tech things, but they're part of the reason. I'm going to be a little bit, no disrespect to my other health, but veterinarians are incredibly great public health professionals, and veterinarians do a lot of work around public health. That's their role in the military and also in developing countries. So I think that there's certainly opportunities for that. We focus on aspects of that in our One Health course for exposure for our students, and certainly talk about resource restricted settings. So because, and one of the reasons I think veterinarians are sometimes perform better in public health settings and resource restricted things is because that's kind of the norm for us with animals until more recently. Because we just very rarely get to talk about any kind of intervention or healthcare for an animal where cost isn't a component of that discussion because of the absence of third-party pairs. So that's why I think veterinarians, not only because of our broad public health training, because we do comparative medicine as a component of just everything we do, because we look at multiple species, and we also have responsibilities for human health aspects in the public health range for in the standpoint of controlling zoonotic diseases. But I also think veterinarians are particularly skilled, not only for animal health, but broadly public health in any kind of resource restricted setting, because it's the norm of our practice.
Okay, that certainly is quite interesting. That I guess the question then becomes, how do you get the word out? How do you make the contacts? U.S. Agency for International Development is the organization that I spent most of my adult life working for. And particularly the concept of expanding the use of IT in large animal husbandry could be something that would be of interest to USAID. Anyway, that's just an idea. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm a member, as probably many of us are, of the Arizona Land and Water Trust. And if you have not been in contact with them yet, they are an organization that works with ranchers, especially throughout southern Arizona, theoretically throughout all of Arizona, but at this point, mostly southern Arizona, on range management issues, on animal health issues, on the financial aspects of ranching. And I'm going to suggest to that organization that they get in touch with you, because I think that you could, if you have not yet developed overlapping areas of interest, that could be quite useful for you.
Thank you. I'd really appreciate that. Actually, when you were talking, it reminded me, in many ways, some technology has advanced more quickly in developing countries and particularly mobile phone based, because of the dependence on mobile phones. And so in actuality, there's a lot of adaptation of particularly mobile phone based technology around animal health that is used far more in developing regions. And we've actually been having that conversation around how we can bring that back into some of the underserved regions in the US, because that technology is exactly what we need. So it's more how can advancements in those regions help us here, because we're struggling in some areas where those technologies would be really helpful.
Absolutely. I'm aware that USAID was involved for a number of years in financial, setting up financial systems that can react to mobile phone requests for, transfers of funds. But I do not know whether they have gotten involved in your area, and it could be quite interesting. Thank you.
I'll jump back in because you built a bridge here that, with our responsibilities to the Navajo Nation, we have telemedicine, which is expanded certainly in psychiatry and a number of areas like radiology and pathology. And it should be easily expandable. We do have one of our former surgeons who's done quite a bit in terms of international telemedicine. Are you developing that with your curriculum and the use of modular studies that are avoid the face-to-face encounters, which we have to avoid because of COVID.
Yeah, well, actually, I think our students are going to be farther along in being prepared for telemedicine because of COVID. Um, and and so there's kind of two things here. So first I'll talk about that. So first of all, one of the really important aspects of veterinary medicine, and this in your interactions with any health professional, whether it's been a veterinarian or your physician or other human health professional, is how important good communication skills are, right? And so that's one of the things we've started from the first week of classes, and had been part of the plan that we would have our students, in person with actors who are playing the role of being a client, so that our students can practice having communications with them and working through client communications. And we had to move those online. And so it's many ways our students are doing, they're starting to practice telemedicine, at least from the communication skills already. And I fundamentally believe that COVID-19 has radically advanced the use of telemedicine. It just has. In veterinary medicine, the practices in town have picked up, maybe in different aspects, not all practices have picked up like full telemedicine platforms, but many are doing video based initial screenings or triage or wellness check-ins. So that has really moved along. One of the areas I actually think it's going to be rapidly taken up in the companion animal field. The place where I'm really hopeful that telemedicine, to your point, in rural and underserved areas will be a way that we can actually build a business model. The reason that veterinarians are in these rural communities is that the current existing business model doesn't allow them to make a living. I'll just say that pretty clearly. Veterinarians in rural areas, you don't generate any revenue when you're driving 4 hours between ranches, right? You're not generating anything. So the ability to have more telemedicine capacity actually is one of the things that I think is a transformational approach for actually building a successful business model in these underserved areas, and particularly in rural areas where there could be relatively large distances. And so if you can manage that by telemedicine, that would be great. The model in veterinary medicine is probably a little bit different than humans, because the telemedicine in human medicine is usually set up at some clinical center, right? So the people are still somewhat coming to some gathered area. For veterinary medicine to be really successful, we likely need it to be able to be at the site of the food animal or large animal. And what we need is rural broadband access. That is the crisis of rural America, in my opinion. If there was a charge that I will, run into the swords for, is that accessibility to broadband in rural areas is really the thing that's keeping many things, but veterinary service out of rural areas.
One crossover between the international health and what you're talking about is from emergency medicine. I discovered that in Yuma, if you had an x-ray of an individual at night, the wet reading that came back to you within a few hours was from a radiologist in India. And then the actual definitive reading was from the radiologist of the hospital there itself. And so the issue of who gets charged what and who's participating in the process could be something that you could use and build upon within the Arizona scene, and have the co-participation outside of the United States. Philippines comes to mind as a difficult challenge politically, but one that, as far as cultures are concerned,
Mhm.
might allow for an interesting expansion, and also relate to both health and food issues.
Yeah, and I think some of that is already happening in veterinary medicine in both radiology and pathology. So that they've quickly, in those models where it's really image reading and digital image reading, we follow close behind our human health colleagues in that.
All right, Dr. Funk, thank you so very, very much for sharing us your insights on this interesting profession and the work that's going on to build this fascinating new institution at the U of A. I know you're right in the middle of it. We wish you good luck and Godspeed for that. And thank you again for sharing your time with us today on behalf of all the Yale.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciated the opportunity and appreciate your offers to connect me. You know, I had much more plans for meeting in the community, and then that's kind of slowed up in our current situation. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting.
All right, goodbye, everybody. Thank you. I'm ending the program. And once again, Dr. Funk, thank you so much.